Good evening and thank you, and welcome to the first council meeting for 2017. I'd like to open proceedings tonight by inviting Captain Michelle Miles from the Salvation Army to open the prayer, please.
Thank you. Let's pray. Father, I just thank you for bringing us safely over the Christmas time, and I just pray for this meeting tonight. I pray for the wisdom of the leaders who are chosen here and who bow before you tonight. And may your blessing rain down upon them. Amen.
Thank you. Before proceeding, I'd like to acknowledge the Tasmanian Aboriginal Community as the traditional custodians of the land we're meeting on tonight, and pay respects to the leaders past and present, and remind everyone that the meeting is audio-visually recorded and will be available on the Clarence website later this week. Thank you. Declare the meeting open and note that we have no apologies. Item 2 is confirmation of minutes for the 5th of December and a special council meeting on the 19th of December. Thank you, Alderman Pearce. Seconded Alderman Chong. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. There's nothing to report at items 3 and 4. Item 5, declaration of interest of Alderman or Post Associate. Alderman Hume. Thank you. Alderman 30? 2. Thank you. There being no other declarations of interest. Item 6, tabling of petitions. Mr. Barter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have 2 petitions tabled. One's for 130 signatories regarding access issues surrounding Freemasons' homes, and the second petition has been received from 236 signatories regarding planned connection of the Torrens Street cul-de-sac in Richmond.
Thank you. Are there any other petitions from the floor? Item 7, public question time. There are no matters on notice. Are there any questions without notice from members of the public? There being none. Item 8, deputations by members of the public. Mr. Barter.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, there's one deputation this evening from Ms. Rachel Gates regarding 11 Torrens Street, from 11 Torrens Street, Richmond, beg your pardon, regarding the Torrens Street cul-de-sac issue.
Thank you, and I do need to remind you that under meeting regs we've only got 3 minutes and there'll be a warning at 2.5 minutes. Sure.
Hello, my name's Rachel Gates of Richmond. I'm speaking today regarding the planned through road in Torrens Street, Richmond. I urge Council to consider negotiating with the developer to make a minor amendment to Engineering Permit Condition 5 of Planning Permit SD 2089. An amendment to remove the requirement to connect the cul-de-sacs in Torrens Street, Richmond would have the following benefits. It would eliminate the identified safety risks as per the independent road safety audit commissioned by the Richmond Primary School Association. It would eliminate the need to raise the height of Torrens Street and therefore eliminating the additional flooding risk this would cause to properties in the surrounding area. It would eliminate the risk of damage to heritage listed properties in the area that the planned roadworks may trigger. It would retain the amenity and safety of the area as currently valued by the local community. It would restore some of the confidence and trust in the council that was lost as a result of the non-consultative initial planning decision to connect the road. It would save the developer money by refunding some of the funds held for the road connection in the bonding process. It would save the council a significant amount of money by eliminating the need to cover the difference in road construction costs beyond the bonded amount, along with the ongoing costs in maintaining the connected road. Amending the permit to remove the road connection would prompt all these benefits and not cause detriment to any person. On the flip side to this, connecting the road seems to serve no purpose and provide no benefits. No reasons for the planned road connection have been forthcoming, despite requests from residents for an explanation. The only reasons that have been provided have been rather circular and unenlightening, along the lines of it is required because it is necessary, and it is necessary because it is required. In the intervening 8 years since the permit was issued, there has been much change in the area subject to the permit. Upstream from the watercourse that flows through Torrens Street have been upgrades to the culverts under Bathurst Street and Bridge Street and along the watercourse banks between the two. The construction of the Richmond bypass has taken place with alterations to the wetlands of the same watercourse upstream. Preliminary works on the Richmond Maze development, again with changes to the same watercourse upstream. Blair Street from the Torrens Street intersection to Bilney Street has been sealed. The eastern cul-de-sac head of Torrens Street has been redesigned, sealed and upgraded. Rainfall and stream hydrology analysis has taken place, requiring the original engineering plans for the Torrens Street road connection to be redrawn and renegotiated between council and the developer. A road safety audit of the development has taken place, finding a number of medium to high risks associated with proceeding with the planned road connection. The permit itself is being amended once in the intervening 8 years. Considering all the changes that have occurred in 8 years, considering a precedent has already been set with one amendment already made to the permit, considering the amendment would not cause detriment to any person, considering an amendment would provide the many benefits already outlined, I would strongly urge Council to listen to the hundreds that have petitioned on this matter and seek an amendment to the permit in negotiation with the developer to stop the connection of the Torrens Street cul-de-sacs. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. No further deputations from members of the public. Motions on notice, Alderman Farmer. Do we have a second, please? Thank you, Alderman Cusick.
That the General Manager prepare a report to Council on National Climate Change Objectives as agreed following the 21st Conference of Parties and how these objectives can be implemented within the Clarence community. The report should include the following issues. How can the Council best respond to the National Climate Change Objectives within the Clarence community? Establish a communication strategy to best inform and build awareness in the community on the climate change objectives, and determine a cost estimate to implement the National Climate Change Objectives within the Clarence community for consideration in future annual plans. Currently there is a large amount of work happening at a local government level, and that support is coming from the Local Government Association, who are looking at discussions with the state government on their climate change action plan. This type of action plan looks at governance, and within the context of a report put by the GAP to the action plan, some of those points that came from that report considered the need for assessing the latest policy projections, preparing for climate extremes and managing emergency responses, and managing climate impacts to enhance livability. Within my perception of where we're going in climate change, with climate change strategies at a council level, is that they seem to at times highlight risk and governance, which of course is our main role, but I do tend to feel that we are leaving some of the community needs behind. The other comments from the GAP report were that councils have had some time to be actively working on reducing organisation carbon footprints. Along with these measures, which include energy efficiency initiatives and renewable energy projects. And I believe that in light of our climate change commitment within our last strategic plan, that we now need to bring on board the community and support them in acquiring the same skills that we need, in informing them and helping them comprehend what their carbon footprints are and how we can work together as a community to go forward with any objectives that Council takes on board.
Whilst both federal, the national government and state government will do this obviously, I think they're looking with a broader brush than the local areas in the city of Clarence, and I think that it's a responsibility of ours to focus to the extent we can, or to at least have a report on how we might address the issues if and when they arise within the City of Clarence.
Okay.
When it comes to climate change, I'm an unabashed, unashamed Thatcherite. And as the Baroness once said, the planet deserves the benefit of the doubt. I don't agree with everything that Alderman Clarence put forward. I think some of it might be a bit onerous, some of it might be unrealistic expectations, but the fundamental skeleton of what's proposed is eminently reasonable. It's not a big burden on council officers' time. It's giving us a map to go forward. And separate to all of that, it might actually put us in the front row for some opportunities as state and federal governments look to doing their part to the Paris Agreement. We're the guys that have our act together around it and can find solutions to them looking for some opportunities. So if you're wavering on this, as I said, it's not actually locking us into doing anything other than reviewing it. So I do support it.
Tasmanian representative on the Australian Coastal Councils Association, I actually support this motion, and I feel that perhaps the officers could actually follow up in relation to where the Australian Coastal Councils Association is at in looking at policy as far as the coast is concerned, because obviously that's an important part of the whole consideration of climate change. And I also think that this report can then inform the discussions that we are having as far as that association is concerned.
I would just like to say, Mr Mayor, that I am supportive of this motion, and to me it represents a common sense approach to what is climate change, and it doesn't need to be any reference to political agendas at all. It's actually a common sense approach to what Clarence must face in the future, and I think it sets a really good example to everybody that this is the way that we need to address climate that is changing. Thank you.
Mr Mayor, the motion says a report should be prepared to see how this council can best respond to national change and climate objectives. So I'm a bit doubtful we can really do much at all, but I support the idea of having a report which will either confirm or deny that we can actually do anything. We haven't got any big industries here that are belching a whole lot of stuff. The actual stuff that I'd imagine you can do is probably something with garbage, recycling, probably, I don't know, if you want to promote more electric cars or something, and cut down on sheep and cattle, because sheep and cattle are ruminants, and they are the ones that cause more green gases than anything else. So I think the report should be done, but I don't really, I'm doubtful that we're going to get any result from it as regarding any action that we can make.
I don't disagree with some of what Alderman Dowson's comments put forward about sheep and cattle. However, Legat has been working with Canberra Council on a project which they finalised last year, and I'm sure they'd be willing to share the outcomes of that project, which was called Triggers for Change, looking at risk management and again those governance actions. Again, local government is looking with Climate Tasmania to do some forums in the early part of this year, again on governance. So I feel that the scale is just a little bit too one way, but we do need a strategy and a process by which we can not only interrelate with government and other councils, but with our community as well. I see your support.
The motion is from Alderman McFarlane that we call on a report on what we might do with climate change. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Item 10, reports from outside bodies. Firstly from Signal and Joint Authorities. Southern Tasmanian Council's Authority. The September quarterly report is pending. The Copping Refuse Disposal Site Joint Authority. Alderman Campbell. Southern Waste Strategy Authority.
Mayor, I'm seeking some correspondence from the quasi-organisation that is on the books, but basically is going to be off the books, to just advise council that we really don't need to have this listed, although under the Local Government Act we have to, I would imagine, because of the entity still exists, but it doesn't operate as such. So I'll endeavour for the next meeting to have some correspondence.
So we're getting some feedback there. Can you?
I beg your pardon.
Yeah, no, it's not your fault. Not your fault.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
So I'll endeavour, Mr Mayor, to get some feedback from Councillor Green on where we stand and what process we're currently up to as far as the deregistering or winding back of Southern Waste Strategy Authority.
And there's nothing to report under the TAS water. So moving on to 10.2, reports from Council and Special Committees, the Audit Panel.
I move, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Seconded, Alderman Cusick. I'll ask the mover and seconder whether they wish to speak to it first of all.
No, thank you, Mr Mayor.
Alderman Hume.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I was just wondering if I could ask the Acting General Manager to give an update on Project 35, which is the upgrade of information technology.
Through you, Mr Mayor. There's been a lot of activity happening within the organisation, also on the part of our software providers, getting the platform established and doing the preliminary planning. There's been a series of quite intense workshops with key staff that's continuing through starting actually again in the new year today. But actually proposing to provide an overview to Aldermen in a workshop in a week or two's time to actually provide a bit more detail around that and provide an opportunity for Aldermen to sort of explore that particular issue in a bit more detail.
Any other comments on the Audit Panel? Right, required, not required.
No,
the motion that the Chairperson's report be received. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Any other reports? I think Alderman Jones.
Yes, Mr Mayor, the minutes of the Tracks and Trails Advisory Committee meetings of the 15th of September 16, the 8th of December 16 and the, oops, hang on, I've got this back to front, the 15th of September 16, the 13th of October 16 and the 8th of December 16. And before I hand them to Mr Van der Heck, I would just like to make a comment in relation to the minutes of the 13th of October and to advise Council that the committee is looking very closely at an allocation of 10,000 has been provided for a Clarence kayak trail. And this is something that we feel that needs to be developed as part of Clarence. And obviously there is affinity for water sports and water movement within the city, so that is something that we are moving on. And also the Kangaroo Bay Rivulet track, and you may be aware there has been some carryover work from 15-16, and for all those persons who are looking forward to be able to walk from Gordons Hill Road through to Kangaroo Bay, it's going to soon happen. And I hope that we just have a little bit of an announcement, Mr Mayor, that that track, which has been sought after, I think, for many years.
It's had a long gestation period, Alderman James, and I think we ought to have an official opening today.
So having said that, Mr Mayor, I'll hand it over to Mr Van der Heck.
Thank you, Alderman James. Any other reports? Alderman Hughes.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I have the Business East Committee of Management minutes from October. And we hear indulged, Mr Mayor, I just wanted to make a quick comment on them. Business East has recently applied for the latest round of Business Enterprise Centre funding and have been informed by the state government that unfortunately they were unsuccessful. They are now facing an uncertain future, and I think it is a valuable service that it would behove this council to look at the possibility of helping to continue in some way. I understand that we have offered to them some professional facilitation to redevelop their strategic plan and have a good look at their strategic direction. I think that's the right way to go, and I hope we can, through our budget processes, look at providing them some further assistance in the future, because it is a very valuable approach.
I haven't received any correspondence advising that. I'm not aware that the General Manager has from Business East requesting any assistance. Item 11.1 weekly briefing reports, and we've got 4 of them, 5th, 12th, 19th of December and 9th of January, if you know. Take Alderman Thurley and second Alderman Campbell. Any questions from the weekly briefing reports? Alderman Jones.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I refer to the 5th of December 2016 and to item 11, the Bellary Oval Transport Plan and Metro issues. On page 11, it says, and I quote, a further briefing, this is the last paragraph, last sentence, a further briefing report will be prepared prior to the game that set out all the arrangements relating to the traffic management. And I don't think we've received that. Perhaps the Acting General Manager can advise that there has been a meeting and the minutes have been confirmed or circulated leading up to the Big Bash or thereafter on the 26th.
Talk about the BOPA meeting.
Yeah, the minutes of recent one. The most recent, which was referred to, Mr Mayor, in this minute. Yep.
Through you, Mr Mayor, I might direct that question to Mr Graham.
Through you, Mr Mayor, I believe that
Supplementary, is that the minutes? Usually we get the actual designation of where the buses are parked, where the patrons exit. You know, there's usually 6 or 7 pages which spells out what the arrangements are going to be. Is that still to come?
That does cover the actual arrangements that were being made for that.
In relation to the 19th of December weekly briefing report, which we discussed at the workshop on Friday, for consideration before it comes back to the next council meeting. The memo that was put forward only related to the context of council's ability to support the problems in the creek. And I would like to ask if we could have some kind of combined meeting about this problem prior to it coming back to council for any adjudication on budget.
Motion is that the info in them be noted. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. 11.2, determination of petitions tabled at previous council meetings, in particular petition for Lauderdale Urban Expansion Feasibility Study. Second Alderman Von Berger. Second Alderman Thurley, I think, was just there. That being a procedural matter basically, but are there any questions? Fairly straightforward. That council notes the intent. Sorry, Alderman Van Berg. No speakers.
In my right to reply, I'll ask a question through the interview. When are we envisaging that we will actually have the result of the consultation?
Okay, so the motion is that the council knows the intent and will consider it at a future meeting. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Council now intends to sit as a planning authority under the Land Use Planning and Approvals Act, and item 11.3.1 is a development application for 6 Fenner Street. I think Alderman Thurley was just there. Alderman Thurley?
Before the Alderman, I've proposed an alternate motion.
Do we have a seconder, please? Alderman Hume, thank you. Alderman Thurley.
Now, the main focus of why I've proposed this alternate motion is that the basis on which Council indicated its refusal for this proposal was virtually around the fact that it considered the dwelling density not compatible, and I question the fact that it's not compatible. The development needs to be compatible with the density of the surrounding area, as that is putting that word in context. But the word compatible, according to the Macquarie Dictionary, means capable of existing together in harmony. And according to my thesaurus, it means well-matched, well-suited, attuned and fitting. Now, the objective for residential dwelling, according to 10.41, is to provide for suburban densities for multiple dwellings that make efficient use of suburban land for multiple dwellings and optimise the use of infrastructure and community services already in existence. The letter that we all received, Mayor and Councillors, from a planning and urban design company laid out quite specifically the way that this proposal actually meets both criteria A and criteria B, although it really only has to satisfy one or the other. It actually satisfies both criteria. The density of the surrounding area in the context of the Southern Regional Land Use Strategy requires the provision of a range of dwelling types, scale and affordability. Dwelling density has a direct bearing on housing affordability. The density of the surrounding area is comprised of a range of building forms, from large houses on equally large sites to suburban dwellings on lots and clusters of multiple units. Now, there were some developments that have been approved under the 2007 planning scheme. Those densities, when they are assessed, actually indicate that they fit within the density that is compatible with this area, the surrounding area. Now, criteria B focuses on providing a range of housing type and affordability in appropriate locations, but the proposal is within 5 minutes of a bus stop, whilst in the county report it didn't acknowledge that this was the case, and it's conveniently located on Howard Road, so there's a number of walking distance availability of food stores, pharmacies, coffee shops, news agencies. This is a really sensible use of a site. And whilst the idea of density can cause angst with local communities and local governments, it's because there's a perception that more dense development actually means bad development. But the reality is that when it's done well, as is this case, more dense development can result in economic, environmental and social benefits. And at a broader level, there's evidence to indicate that a strong negative correlation between the total energy consumption of the city and its overall urban density, and that converts to the lower the density, the more energy consumed. So in this case, we're arguing that it's a little tad high. So while large traditional freestanding homes or apartments remain in demand, they don't meet everybody's needs. And with the ageing baby boomers, we have this need, before you actually go into retirement homes, to transition from your normal residence to something smaller. And already we have interest in this development from people who already are in the area. And the designs of these, even though we're not debating that today, really fit with a need that is going to exist, and it's going to continue to exist, and it's going to increase. So there's many benefits to be gained, and I really question the fact that we have to look at the reason for refusal as being not compatible when it is really open for interpretation. And I ask Council to actually consider that interpretation.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I really wrestled with this one because I think it's a bit of a borderline decision, but a couple of things that's worth noting. One of them is, and I know in the past we've had developments approved where something hasn't met the acceptable solution and may not have met the performance criteria, but a minor amendment to meet the acceptable solution would make very little difference in the impact. So example is we've had developments where there's been some overshadowing, but the overshadowing would remain much the same had the development been amended to meet the acceptable solution. So in this case, we're looking at a development where there is 2.5 square metres difference between the density proposed and the acceptable solution. A very minor difference. You could add 10 square metres to the block and they could meet the acceptable solution. Having said that though, we do need to look at the performance criteria. I actually disagree with Alderman Thurley on one point, which is that the development, the contention of the developers that the development complies with Part B, noting that it only has to comply with Part A or B of performance criteria 1 in 10.1. Because it refers to something with a significant social benefit, and a significant social benefit to me means something like a social housing or community housing development, which this is not, and that's why the officers didn't refer to bus stops, menus, etc. However, I do disagree with the officers' report on Part A, which is the question of density. And the reason is the tribunal, they referred to a tribunal decision, Flood versus Georgetown Council, which refers to arguments in terms of consistency with densities in the area, and says to be a compatible density, the density must be consistent. Now, it's interesting to note that the tribunal didn't explain what any of the other criteria were in terms of compatibility. It simply looked at consistency. Compatibility, as explained in the dictionary definition, is it's in harmony. It means it doesn't create conflict with the area. And my question is, if you're going to use the word compatible rather than consistent, you need to look at, well, in terms of being compatible, what is the conflict? So what is the conflict that is caused by this density? And I haven't seen any arguments advanced to say that developing to a density of 325.5 square metres, 322.5 square metres would cause issues with pressure on services, would cause issues with traffic, would cause any kind of conflicts with the surrounding area. I would like to know, to see an argument to say that the development is not compatible. I would like to see something advanced that says there is some kind of conflict created, that this density is not in harmony. And I think for the sake of a difference of 2.5 square metres per unit from the acceptable solution, we can apply a bit of leeway, but also recognise that the word compatible, I think, has a much broader definition than the tribunal recognised in the flood decision. I think the tribunal was actually very light on in their analysis of the issue. You cannot look just at the issue of consistency. I think that's a very narrow approach to take when you're talking about compatibility. I think compatibility is a much broader concept.
I agree with Alderman Hume. I think that what the planners have recognised in this particular matter is that the compatibility, and that is in harmony with the rest of the area. If we are to approve this as per the recommendations before the Chair, then it will be in conflict. It will be in conflict, Alderman Holm, because the stipulation that the tribunal made, and it was broad in its decision, and it says the tribunal noted in its decision that whilst the density proposed may be compatible with the surrounding residential amenity, the proposed density compatibility needs to be considered in the context of the density of the surrounding area. That is extremely important. When I met with Mr Johnson today, I took a drive along Corinth. I always get those Venice and Corinth mixed up. And nowhere in the immediate vicinity of 6 Venice Street are there any other units unless you get down to where Mr Ackerman lives on the corner of Corinth, where it perpendiculars up to Tranmere Road. So what you have in there are blocks of about 1,250 square metres, and only at the tail end of Corinth Street do you actually get a couple of units tucked away. The rest of that area, from 6 Venice up to Tranmere, and from along Corinth almost to the end, you have no unit development, or do you have a conflict in relation to the development that's being proposed here. So Alderman Holm is wrong when he says that there is, it's not in harmony and it doesn't create conflict. That's not so. It will create conflict because the whole scale of this proposal of 4 units, even though it's 2.5 under the acceptable solutions, 10.4.1A1, it's going to conflict with the rest of the amenity of the area because of the very nature of this development and the impact it will have on the immediate vicinity. So look, the planners have it right. They have it right when they say on page 33, the proposed density of one dwelling per 322.5 square metres is considered to represent significant divergence. And it is, because nowhere in that immediate vicinity of 6 Venice Street do we have in harmony a development of this nature. We don't. We don't. And therefore, the planners have said that, and I quote, it is considered to represent a significant divergence between the existing dwelling density of one dwelling per 1,530 square metres, therefore is not considered compatible. It's not considered compatible with the density of the surrounding area. And I agree with that, because it doesn't. It's in conflict if we take the definition to the extent that one or two others have mentioned here this evening. And in summary, the proposal therefore does not satisfy clause 10.4.1 P1A of the scheme with respect to density compatibility.
Yeah, I've thought long and hard about this, but I think now I do support Alderman Thurley's motion. Alderman James makes some very good points. But the compatibility with the surrounding area would be no less if these lot sizes were 325. Would still be, and on Alderman Jones' argument, would still be incompatible. But they would be approved. I think 2.5 square metres per unit, the basis on which the officers recommended refusal, I don't think it is significant enough to refuse this application. And furthermore, if the place next door or another place in Clarence Street wanted to build units, and we say, oh no, we can't have any units in this area because it will never be compatible until blocks of units start to be built. And I reiterate, if these are 325 square metres per unit, it would be no less compatible, but it would be different. So I think I support Alderman Burley's motion.
Yes?
That's what Alderman Jones says. I mean, if you read this note, it says they created a wholly different standard on which prevails cannot be considered compatible with the density of the surrounding area. Well, it's black and white. It says the proposed density of one dwelling of 322.5 square metres is considered to represent a significant divergence between the existing density of a dwelling of 1,530 square metres. Well, I mean, you know, compatibility and harmony, and they come straight down as Alderman Jones says, does not satisfy clause 10.4.1.
Yes. Other speakers? Alderman
I'd just like to remind some aldermen and perhaps inform other aldermen about a situation that we had 2010-2011. Talk about multiple dwellings within the Tranmere area. And I think it's really pertinent to go back to that because there was a lot of concern, and I'm sure it still is, about multiple dwellings. And it is a contentious issue. And I think it's important to actually remember that the Eastern Shore Planning Scheme actually required 375 square metres as a minimum. Then the 2007 Planning Scheme also required that. Now it is down to 325 square metres. And now what we're being asked to do is go lower than 325 square metres. So I think that needs to be kept in mind. The other thing that I think we need to keep in mind is the word density. The scheme doesn't actually define density. And I'm afraid that I actually didn't have a Macquarie dictionary at home. Go online and get a subscription to the Macquarie Dictionary, but the Oxford Dictionary and the Collins Dictionary have similar definitions to density, and it's about the quantity of people or things in a given space. So I think we need to keep in mind that aspect of density when we're looking at this issue. From my perspective, the current planning scheme doesn't give us much help. The performance criterion is very open. It's not prescriptive. In some jurisdictions, there's much more prescriptive requirements around density. And so it makes it much easier for developers, for officers, for councillors to actually determine whether or not a development is applicable. I think it's very important to keep in mind that the word compatible actually relates to with the density. And I believe that the officers have
shown very clearly that this development is not compatible with the density across the surrounding area. Now, that is another two words, surrounding area, that are not defined as well. What is the surrounding area? The officers have come up with what they believe the surrounding area is, and also in the decision that the tribunal made recently, they have actually looked at that too. But I think it's really important to keep in mind what are we actually wanting from density. And I believe that those questions have not actually been answered by the planning scheme. The planning scheme is remiss in that. And for my part, I actually feel that Council needs to support the officer's recommendation in relation to this matter.
Okay. Other speakers? Alderman Pearce.
Thank you, Mayor. And I thought long and hard on this one too. And when I first had a look at the plan on the attachments at the back, I thought, geez, that looks a lot of crowded units. And when I had a look at the site, I still believe that motion. I still believe it's a lot of crowded units on that site. You know, I can go into density and what everybody else has said, ambience and everything else. But once I looked at the area around there, I do agree with similar things to Alderman James said. I didn't see a whole block of units, and I can sort of understand that, you know, the shadow diagram would certainly affect one of the places nearby. Also, I drove around to get you know, some ambience over the area, and I thought, you know, geez, this is totally out of character. I do believe that I cannot support this and refuse another one we had very similar in Bellree, which we refused. And I think this is along the same lines. I do think the officers have got it right. Look, I'm reluctant to vote against it, but I mean, I believe that the officers have got it right. Looking at the area, I think it all fits in, so I'll be supporting, well, I won't be supporting Alderman Cleary's motion.
Other speakers? Alderman Clark.
I to support the officer's recommendations, and again, within the context of the decision made, I support some of the arguments that's been put forward by other aldermen. Again, what we see and what I felt when we were having the interim planning scheme basically written for it, was on the grounds that there was some disagreement between the market and councils that the councils weren't being fair. So within the context of the new interim planning scheme, the allowance of the minimum unit lot size from 375 down to 325, I accepted in the context that, okay, well that's a compromise, we'll settle with that. However, as we know, with a lot of planning issues here, they are always a continuing moving feast. For whatever reason and justification comes forward. And in some contexts there may well be a lot, I'm thinking of one up top of Glebe Hill that has 4 units on it, that's in a fairly open environment, that doesn't, I think it does, you know, give a little bit of privacy and overshadowing, but not much, and built in a way that the driveway actually accommodates the adjacent landowners' needs for solar, etc. Blocks their view, but they do get their solar passive use. So within that context, there is an ability for 4 units on a smaller lot to be designed to be fit with an area. However, when we're retrofitting areas, I find this application difficult. Again, I don't feel that the discretionary ability of this council should be called on for a plan that could be done to meet the scheme as it is.
I think there's two. Thank you, Ms. Mayor. The issue of compatibility is a really difficult one because it's so subjective. I'm listening to the discussion. It's a sometimes very subjective argument. I guess for me it's come down, as Alderman Kusick has said, if these are 325 square metres each, you could put 4 of them on the block, and it might look nothing like anything else within the entire surrounding area, and it would perhaps not even come to council for consideration. It may be passed on the delegation. So the fact that there are 4 units and they're small may make us aggrieved because we might not want to live in them, but they may actually suit people and might suit the way that people want to live. Discretion is always difficult, and we sometimes wrestle with making a discretion on something that's quite minor or sometimes seems to be quite major. 2.5 square metres per unit is not a huge percentage discretion, and I think that I will be supporting Alderman Thurley's alternative.
Look, I won't be quoting the dictionary or the thesaurus, Macquarie, Oxford or either. But I would say on the topic of harmony that whilst I like Stevie Wonder and Paul McCartney, when they came together and created the atrocity that was Ebony and Ivory, a lot of harm was done to society everywhere. Look, if you want to take the extreme in local government, you have NIMBY, anti-everything's at one end of the spectrum, and you have white-shoed, voracious gives at the other. Now tonight, the people we're dealing with, the appellant proponents, are nowhere near anywhere on that spectrum. They are much further. I would say that I have been a really challenging item to think about and to work through. As many of us have, we've spoken to the proponents, we've either driven to either side or inspected it. But what I was mentioning earlier was the fact that this new scheme, if you think about where things have gone, the changes have probably and generally been perceived as being more friendly and conducive to development than frustrating or challenging. This is the new scheme that we're under. Norms and rules haven't necessarily been established. But if you want to achieve a fairer, simpler planning scheme, I'd highly recommend the 2007 Clarence planning scheme. It's a ripper. It's prior to the deformities developed the PD criteria, it was pretty black and white. And under that scheme, density was simple. 375 metres squared was the minimum, no ifs, no buts. And whilst it's not a matter for the planning authority, the proponents tonight do have a history of quality development in the Clarence area. And I'll cite 15 Balloon Street, and I would cite 14 Leslie Street as the type of infill projects that you want to see occurring. And I would note though with the plot sizes for both that site, the former was 484 metres squared and the latter was 396 metres squared. If Benner Street was coming before us tonight with 3 units on it, not 4, it probably wouldn't even be coming before us. It probably would have been delegated and done. But here's the situation, and this is what we must think of. And look, irrespective of this decision, for or against the matter, however it goes, then I suspect tonight's decision is going to be part of the early formation process around norms and acceptable dealings with density under this new scheme. And the argument's been around the point that 2.5 metres is it's not really here or there. Well, actually, the difference, the drop down from 375 to 325 is profound, and that was the new basis that this came to be. And I guess you've got to ask around the 325, are we seeing that as, in general terms, a sort of line in the sand, is that the minimum, or is that going to become, as this process evolves, the starting point to sort of move downwards in the general residential area? And there is a case for density higher than that, but in the general residential area, that's where we're looking tonight. So, look, I've agonised on this, and after much consideration, I've come to the point of view that I'm not able to support the application. And what I would say to any alderman that is wavering and is unsure which way to go, and it for many is that sort of a decision, when you're in that environment, a bad rule of thumb, or pretty good rule of thumb, you would say, something to fall back on, pretty good default, is to say, well, I'm unsure and the officer's recommendation is. If I'm in a bind, could go one way or the other. Devolving the officer's recommendation in that sense is often a good way to go forward. So as such, I'm not in a position to support the development as it stands.
Thank
Thank you, Mr Mayor. There's been some really good arguments around the table, and I really ask all aldermen to actually look at this particular proposal on its merit and don't put it in a range based on previous planning schemes, based on other situations, because you actually have to look at what's before you, specifically what's before you. And the reality is that it is a very close one. It's a very close one. But also, too, the times are changing. Medium density housing is the way that we have to go. And that's because land sprawl cannot keep occurring, putting pressure on infrastructure constantly. We also have a need in our communities for supporting people who are transitioning from their normal larger homes on larger suburban blocks to smaller, more manageable homes. And with the baby boomers all starting to retire, this is going to be before us. So if you want to sit and not bear in mind some of the contextual changes and the fact that this type of thing is going to come before you more often, and you're going to be hampered by the fact that you've made a decision not to accept, you're going to stop progress and you're going to stand in the way of this community actually embracing medium density housing, because we have pressure on infrastructure, we have public transport, we have amenities, we have communities, things that we need supported. And as a council, we have to embrace change. And this is before us is an example of a proposal that, whilst you say it's the scale of the proposal, you're talking about a very small difference. You're talking about a very small difference which has made this come before us. The fact that there's double garages housed within the building is a wonderful thing for these residents who need security, who need to be able to drive in, have the door come down behind them and not face having to walk. This has increased the envelope for the building. So look at the proposal, see it on its merits, and actually be brave enough to make a decision, because this is for the benefit of Clarence.
Yeah, so the motion before the Chair is the alternative proposal to approve with subject to conditions and advice. All those in favour? Against? The motion is lost, 6-all. Alderman McFarlane, I believe you were willing to move the officer's recommendation. Seconded. Do you wish to speak to it, Alderman McFarlane? Any other speakers? Alderman Hume.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I just wanted to remind Alderman of the argument I made when speaking on Alderman Thurley's motion about compatibility not just being consistency, and I think that's been lost. I didn't actually hear anyone address it. Most, if not all, of the speakers continue to talk about compatibility as if it is consistency. I understand that that's what the tribunal said in the flood decision, but I think the tribunal has the wrong way of looking at it. The tribunal hasn't established any other criteria for what is compatible. Now, just because a density is different or not broadly consistent with that in the surrounding area doesn't in and of itself create a conflict. So the question is, what exactly is the conflict? And I've heard a number of aldermen state as an assertion that there is a conflict, but not actually explain what the conflict is.
I know that I've said quite a bit about this, but the tribunal decision was very broad and very open to your interpretation. And we are aware that this proposal had no objections based on the density issue. So we're the ones that have an issue with the density issue, but nobody that's going to live near that had an issue with the density issue. So it's a decision before this council, but it's disappointing from my point of view that there are no major objections from that could stop this, and yet this council is prepared to do that. In the flood decision, I'll just read out one of the points. It actually says the appellant submits that the requirements of compatibility with the density of the surrounding area does not require a finding that the proposal is consistent with density of the surrounding area. It submits that is the error that the council made in assessing the development application. It submits that unless it can be shown that the proposal is not in harmony with the density of the surrounding area, then the performance criteria can be considered satisfied. I think that's really pertinent because we have an acceptable solution of 325 square metres. And in essence, this is about onus of proof. So, to my way of thinking, it's actually up to, if you like, the developers to prove to us that this lower density than 325 square metres is acceptable. So that is something that I think we need to keep in mind. We have a minimum requirement of 325 square metres, and we have that. Surely we have that, although I can't see the reasoning behind it in the planning scheme. That's what I said. The planning scheme isn't very helpful. It's not very helpful in the purpose of the zone. It's not very helpful in the objective. It's not very helpful in the performance criteria. It doesn't help us as aldermen, as I say. It doesn't help the developer. It doesn't help the staff. It doesn't help the aldermen in the decision. We have a minimum of 325 square metres for some reason. Why do we have that? That's the question I asked you. Perhaps, if this goes to the tribunal, perhaps then we will actually get some discussion about that, that then may actually be able to be implemented at some form of point in the new statewide planning scheme. Because I think that's where it comes to. Why do we have a minimum of 325 square metres? And I could actually say to you, perhaps it's like the Western Australian situation in the city of Gosnell, where they're actually looking at making more efficient use of land near commercial and community and public transport facilities, increasing patronage of public transport, improving the viability and vitality of local shops and other businesses, providing a range of housing types, etc., etc., etc. We need some reason to be able to say, yes, you can go under the 325 square metres, because at some point we have to say, this is the minimum, and unless you can prove to us why you shouldn't go under the minimum, then you can't. That's my argument, and I think that's what it is actually saying, buried in this decision of the tribunal.
Other speakers? By reply?
I would agree with that sentiment because on the face that we look at a planning scheme being put forward in a very broad approach across the whole of the state without looking at local areas which we had before. So in looking at what was put forward by the appellant in the context that these developments were for the benefits of people in their 70s and 80s, the market demand will be there, but the relevance of it being for elderly people close to shops, etc., and the bus stop. Can't get me started on the bus stop, because the bus stop is being used as a justification for allowing units anywhere within 400 metres of the bus stop. You could be on the side of a hill with a 90-degree slope. And you still get through. Excuse me, I don't know where this is coming from. So So within the performance criteria, we need to look at the relevance of the argument getting put forward. That to provide provision of suburban densities for specific reasons, we need to look at areas where these are suitable for, not just where they can be put for the sake of being able to fit a planning scheme that says that they can. Within this particular area, from my preference, there is quite a degree of slope coming from the shopping centre. It's a very wide section of road to get from the bus coming back from town if anybody was walking. And within the degree of the two-storey housing, and they may have an ability to have a lift. However, downsizing to me is not a three-bedroom house with bedrooms being on the top floor. Just a personal preference. But from the context of the reasons why this was refused by the staff, the density of one dwelling, 3.22.5, is considered to represent a significant divergence, and that's what I stand by in this refusal.
Okay, so the motion before the Chair is the officer's recommendation. All those in favour? Against? The motion is lost as it stands. In the interest of this, Council maintaining its competence to deal with the issue, I'll recommit the motion. All those in favour? Against? Carried. That concludes our business as a planning authority.
Time.
11 point, customer service, and that's it. There's nothing under customer service. So 11.5.1 is asset management. And it's the bushfire management strategy for council-controlled land. Moved Alderman Campbell. Second Alderman Pearce. Speakers. Alderman Pearce. He's declined. Alderman Pearce, seconder.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, I went through this and I was pretty pleased with it, but I just raised attachment 2. And we know we've had a fire at the Waverley Park, Hall Park recently, and I was just going on attachment 2, and it just said there was a complaint by a person sitting in Waverley Street about this, and I just noticed that the action by council was no action required. Now, I know this was done, the date on this was I think June 2016, but at that stage, no action required. The thing has just blown, the fire has just blown up. So I just wonder with Waverley Park, what are we going to do to make sure that we keep an eye on that in future years? Now, I don't mean next year, I mean the next 5, 6 years.
Was that a question?
Yeah, well, I know Mr. Clarence, just take it on board.
We'll just take it on board, I think. Alderman Jones.
I'm going to follow up on Alderman Pearce, Mr Mayor, and pose this question, it's a question, to Mr Graham in his capacity as acting manager. Mr Graham, should Council endorse the recommendations as listed on the agenda on page 74, would that, in light of what's happened with the fire outbreak on Waverley Park, is there enough grit and, what's the word I'm looking for, backbone within this recommendation to sort of preempt or to bring in the trucks or bring in the necessary equipment to basically prevent or do what it can to at least abort this particular matter that happened in Waverley? Would you be able to clarify that, please?
Mayor, I actually haven't been reported me on the actual specifics of what happened or I believe that, yes, the fire management strategy is put on council, but in that particular case, I'll take the time to actually investigate and report back to council.
Thanks, Mr. Graham. Any other? Alderman Farmer.
I attended a bushfire breakfast with you. I can't remember what they called it for. But in private discussion at the table and with the local headmistress, there is considerable interest in a call through the school to train up young people as support. Mention and support of that within our fire management strategies. The fire service have got a youth group which work with them on a regular basis and train up in a proper formal manner, and the schools are interested in doing this. And I would like council to actually look at it in the future.
Alderman Dowse.
A couple of years ago, I was speaking to Mr. Lee, Chris, who you might recall, you've been a firewood or something around here. And his big concern was that all the fire roads that are up over in those bush areas have been left to deteriorate, they've been left to fall on with trees or whatever. It's sort of a fire engine or some sort tries to go into those areas. One, they can't get in there, and worse is probably if they had to go another way, they probably couldn't get out. Now his recommendation is why, at that stage, why didn't this council or the fire service start looking at the basic infrastructure of accessibility to these areas which can be defended. Otherwise, you just got to let them go and probably have some mortality rates among firefighters.
It's important to note that this deals with council-owned and council-controlled land, and that access to, for example, the Meehan Range, which might be controlled or owned by parks or private property, is another matter that's been subject to the Meehan Range strategy, for example, which we might address in another forum, but this one is about council-controlled land or council-owned land. Any other speakers, please? In that case, right reply, Alderman Campbell.
Well, I think that Alderman Dowse does sound a serious warning, because that's exactly what has happened, be it on council land or on private or anywhere else. And I've seen a lot of it, and it's time to clean it up for our own sake. Otherwise, we've only got 2 or 3 days to a month to go, and it's 50 years, and it'll happen again. And don't just put your heads in the sand and say it won't, because I saw it happen and I know what the result was. People who sit around and say, oh, you'll be right, and that, it won't be right, and it still isn't right. So be warned, it will happen. And take note of Alderman Dowse's warning too as well.
So the motion is that we incorporate several modifications and endorse the bushfire management strategy. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Nothing under financial management. Moving on to governance. 11.7.1 is proposed transfer to council of 138 East Derwent Highway Linds Fund.
Yes, I'm doing this on the fly, Your Worship. Sorry for that. I move a motion of deferral.
Second that, Mr. Mead. That being procedural, I'll put the motion that this matter be deferred. Is there any time frame? Well,
say 2 meetings.
For what reason?
Well, it's a procedural motion that it be
If I could
deferred.
speak, I would be talking about how we might actually be able to do something instead of nothing, but I can't.
As a matter of order, we'll proceed with the procedural motion. All those in favour that it be deferred? Carried. Thank you.
You're going to buy it.
Thanks, I'm going to put a step station on.
I understand that Alderman Hume and Alderman Thurley declared an interest. Moved Alderman Campbell. Seconded Alderman Pearce.
Through you, Mr Mayor, the recommendation it actually says a matter for council, so we need to be clear.
We do need
The motion is
Mr Mayor, we've got to have
as further set out here.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor.
And I take that's still seconded by Alderman Pearce. Does anyone wish to speak to this? Alderman James, I think it's... did you want to speak, Alderman Pearce? As seconder?
Oh, no, I like to I read it and I wouldn't mind it going myself. But
Too many. I remind council that this meeting is being recorded.
Yeah. But Mayor, it's been a long time since I've actually had a study tour with James, but look, I think it's a wonderful opportunity. Look, I don't knock aldermen that want to go away and do a study tour. I think it's fantastic. We've got two keen aldermen that wants to go. I've read information. I think it's a very worthy trip to go on, because it's not just a trip, it's a study tour, and I think it's fantastic that those two aldermen put their hands up, and I fully support them going.
Alderman James.
I've thought long and hard about this, and
Please, Alderman Pearce.
I don't want to go. And at the dinner table tonight, I actually provided some reasons why I felt that the two aldermen in question will be representing the City of Clarence. And they will be sitting around the table with senior officers, council of agencies and so on and so forth. And they will, by all intents and purposes, Mr Mayor, be representing the City of Clarence. And the very nature of representing the City of Clarence could be construed as being what Clarence thinks, or what its policies, what its views, what its decisions, to a lesser extent, are in relation to key matters. Now, at the dinner table tonight it was mentioned that it's just not transportation. It's many views. It can deal with mergers. It can deal with cycleway, pedestrian walkways, beautification of cities, etc., etc. And the question's going to be asked, I would have thought, what do you think Clarence ought to be doing in the way of providing some of these essential services that we have here in Auckland or New Zealand? So it's going to put those persons in a very awkward situation. And when I went on the trip to Western Australia many years ago on the marina development of Rouse Bay, that was one of the factors that, of course, I had an officer with me, an experienced officer who knew exactly what council had espoused in the way of the marina development, the Wharf Corporation has proposed at Rouse Bay. And we met with 5 councils, 5 shires, and our focus, and we went out and visited the marina and the canals, etc., and saw a number of factors, and we actually witnessed a number of canals under construction and so on and so forth. But the whole time we were there, we had somebody, a professional, who was able to discuss and basically relate to what council, Clarence Council, has in the way of this. I'm not opposed to study tools, but I think we need to be very, very careful in what we are ticking off on as far as what the ambassador and ambassadress, I think the ambassadors, are espousing, or what they are saying, or what they are going to say, and what may come out of those discussions. There's nowhere in here for a report, and when then Alderman Mulder went to China, he provided a report. I provided a report on the marina development, and that was some pages, and I thought at the time Alderman Mulder did a very good job with that. I still have a copy, by the way. So I just think that we need to be careful. I think if we're going to tick this off as a study tour, then again I think we need to make it quite clear to these representatives that they're there to absorb, learn, but not necessarily, Mr Mayor, be spokesperson on behalf of the city. That's
We've been involved in a lot of transport, and a lot of transport activities all around this municipality. And I think, it's about time someone's got out to see the big world about what the new initiatives are in these areas. Places like New Zealand, that seem to be more sort of go ahead than a lot of places in Australia. Not only in agriculture and everything, but probably everything else. The government's very supportive of initiatives to helping the community over there. I think this is an excellent chance for some of our people to go over there, get briefed up, and brought up to speed. And maybe they can bring us up to speed on what the new initiatives are. Otherwise, we sit there and just digest amongst ourselves what we already know, and just we might be missing out on a lot of opportunities. I think it's a great idea if they're willing to go.
Just reiterating what I said on our briefing day, I would like the Alderman Theory and Cole to seek some feedback before they go from the chairman of the cycle committee on some information that she might find relevant. But for me, when we're looking at a report back, which is part of your agreement when you sign up for these things, is on page 1.1, report in detail 2.2, it states that they would have a possible meeting with the walking and cycling manager to discuss Auckland's cycleway building program. And in the past, when I've gone to other councils, I've actually come back with business management plans. So I'm quite sure that they would have some strategies, maps, concept designs and analysis that could be shared with us as a council. And then again, last point from the bottom, talking about the Northern Busway field trip, including park and ride facilities, which I'm sure Alderman Walker will be thrilled with. Again, if they've got these in place, then they would have, maps or brochures that can be brought back, and again, with some kind of cover note from people who manage them. Because for me, I don't want to just know about strategy. I like to know about the detail. The detail is contained in the management strategy. So when I went to Redlands Council way back with the marina, I actually came back with a marina management plan from the Redlands Council. So it covered what the needs were for the body and what the ongoing long-term strategic option. So these people will be quite happy to share that kind of thing if we just I look forward to getting some of that info.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Look, I do support the motion, and in yes, Minister speak, it's hardly a fact-finding tour to Jamaica in the middle of July. It is a worthwhile expedition. Looking at the timelines provided, it's actually a bit of a pity that there isn't much spare capacity left in their itinerary the way that they're planning to go. And I say that because an extra half day would have been very worthwhile for them to take a ferry ride across from Auckland to Devonport on that North Shore, because in many ways that area has what we want to achieve for Kangaroo Bay and Morsey Hill. Good ferry walk, all that sure. You've got a nice Great Ferry Wharf, and actually at that wharf the bike storage is rational and well utilised for people that are commuting. The view from the top of the mountain there is sensational. It's a big tourist mecca. Even down to the simple things like the fact that they've built the toilet sort of into the ground, so the roof is actually a big viewing area where you can go over the city, and it just blends in and harmonises with that. And also I'd say that given the context of merger examinations occurring in Tasmania at the moment, there is no more important place for contemporary learnings on this than Auckland. And whilst I personally think that the $1.5 million art installations they put on the Auckland waterfront is just outrageous, a $1.5 million replica of a state house. It's almost saying to people, here's the houses you used to be able to buy that no one can afford anymore. But anyway, on that was actually funded, that $1.5 million with private donations. So if it's not a cent of ratepayer money being spent, well, that's great. So whether we can learn about how to get some philanthropy around our public art, I'd be happy to get Qantas half that. But there are other things we do have to learn. Why did they get the IT integration when they merged so fundamentally wrong? What impact did the fee harmonisation process have on the new council funding? Because I understand that all the fees went down to the lowest level. Has the process reduced rates or improved community satisfaction with council? Well, it's a fact-finding tour, and I'm also speaking about
Let's not interrupt, Alderman.
How did a situation arise where $500,000 was spent on a new logo for the council? What processes allow, the cabal within Auckland Transport to invest in so much money? How did the rates harmonisation process go? Were there any rate job with that? And around their committee structures, what are the costs with their committees? How many do they have? I understand they have sitting fees. Is that a good way to go? And look, Auckland is an interesting place. In New Zealand, it's far and away the place where there's most population growth occurring, and that is putting big strains on the area and the wider region. And we are nowhere near that, but we are, the fastest pace of growth in real terms, maybe not on a percentage basis, in Tasmania. So there are potential learnings from that, and I'd be interested to know population growth aside, what other factors there might have been with housing affordability. So I'll have quite a few questions for them to take over, and I think we're going to get quite a bit of value from this compared to some other trips, so that's excellent.
Mr Mayor, I'd just like to make the comment that over the past 2 years, coming to know really look forward to actually getting their
Alderman for traffic, so not calling that into question. Alderman Walker did mention a number of things that I was going to mention, because Auckland is a similar layout. It's much bigger than Hobart, but it's got a river and harbour, call it what you like, down the centre of it, and as Alderman Walker mentioned, it's got a good ferry service across to the northern side of it, and yes, it's the port itself is similar to the Hobart port, where the ships come in, actually right in the middle of the centre of the city. The railway is still there from down the bottom now. I've forgotten Alderman Walker, but there's that, and off, but it only serves the southern side of the city, not dissimilar to what we had here. So I think there's a lot of merit in what they've taken up, and I wish them well and hope that they do. motion then is that we approve the application for the two aldermen to travel. All those in favour? Against? Carried.
Was a guest and the managing director of Air New Zealand.
Can we invite them back in, please? Alderman's question time. There are no matters on notice. So question 12.4, questions without notice. Alderman Monberto, can we start here, please? Alderman Pearce, Alderman Dowse, Alderman Cusick.
Yes, could I ask of yourself, Mr Mayor, or the acting General Manager, when do we expect, or do we know when we might expect to have the SGS final report? I know we've had the UTS report on the interim SGS report, which wasn't very flattering, but obviously UTS can't do any more until the final SGS report.
Last I heard was we're due to get it mid-January. Whether it's actually arrived yet or not over the desk, I certainly haven't seen it.
And through you, Mr Mayor, I don't have a date. I do know that they are still working on it, but they haven't given me an I haven't had an indication of a date at this point in time.
Yeah, mid-January.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Two questions. First of all, has there been any further progress on the transfer of management authority of the Kangaroo Bluff Battery to Council?
I need to take that one on notice through you, Mr Mayor.
Not since just before Christmas. I think we...
Second question, Mr Mayor, has Clarence Council considered putting in an application for the Building Better Regions Fund?
Perhaps we can talk about it at the workshop, next workshop, and explore what options there are and whether it's worthwhile proceeding down that path. All right. Alderman Chong. Alderman Farnham.
Two things. One, when might the master plan for the Cambridge area be finalised? And two, when might the toilet be installed at Roches Beach?
Separate questions there, Mr Graham. Are you able to provide an answer? Cambridge Master Plan, when will it be finalised?
I think we do.
Toilet at Roches Beach?
We're working through, the design of the Roches Beach and all the stuff.
Mr Mayor, I was going to ask Mr Graham about the Lauderdale toilet at the canal, and you just mentioned that that's at design stage. And is there anything holding it up at this point? Because there was an issue with planning and there was an issue with Crown land. Is that all being resolved?
Yes, the plan has that recommendation of a change to location of the toilet.
Walker.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Through you to, I suspect, Mr Graham. Just wanting an update on the expected current anticipated commencement and completion around the All Abilities Playground in Bellary Beach.
Through you, Mr Mayor, so the contract done and started today on site. report.
Just confirming there is a third stage to that which hasn't been contracted yet for the... Alderman James.
Questions. First of all, in relation to the Tasmanian Football Federation, which I think is the correct name, that organisation has shown interest in the Cambridge Oval and development. So my question through you to Mr. Barter, or he may have to handball it to Mr. Graham. Have we received any response back from the Football Federation about their plans to develop it? And if not, can we write to them and ask them, you know, what do they propose to do? Are they still interested, etc.? Thank you.
Now we have a process for their plan.
Question, and it's a welcome back to Mr. Toohey, and so my question through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Toohey. Mr. Toohey, is there any council policy or bylaw that council can pursue through its environmental health officers or officers of that ilk to declare unfit a house for human habitation?
No,
Yes, without going into any detail, are you aware of any situation in Rugby that there is a particular dwelling? Okay, thanks.
Second question, Alderman.
Yeah, second question I forgot. Mr. Mayor, I've been privy to using the South Street dog fenced off area, and I would like, there's a drain that needs fixing there because every time the dogs go near the water they end up in a mess. The question is, could that drain be fixed, please? Because I've already asked but nothing's happened. I've been... And also too, I think there should be an alternate tap put in at the other end, because there's one tap there servicing.
Perhaps you could raise it as an ordinance request.
Yeah.
But certainly we'll follow up on it.
I just wanted to put it on record.
Thank you. You got a question, Alderman Bass?
Yes. A house on Cambridge Road, which seems to have been inundated with a whole lot of, I don't know, surplus goods, and which seems to need to be cleaned down. I don't know.
Well, you have now drawn it to the attention of the enforcement officer and follow up. And perhaps Mr. Toohey get a briefing on both of those questions, please. Thank you. That brings us to the conclusion of the open session. Could I have a motion to adjourn the closed session, please? Alderman Pearce, second, Alderman McFarlane. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. If we could